Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today at Juanette's Crafting Corner for our Slow Stitch Saturday. Again, working on our snippets. So, the prompts today are bringing in the color red. So, I've got a couple of scraps of fabric that are red. And then the stitch we're going to use is called a running stitch, but whipped. So let's go ahead and lay down some fabrics. Now, if you recall, remember, always leave whatever you have last laid down as far as lace or fabric. Don't stitch it all the way down, because you may want to tuck something underneath there. For instance, if I did that like that, I would lose that pretty scallop. If I lay it here, that leaves too much of a blank spot in there. Now, of course, we could go in there and stitch something there, but if I lift this up and then lay that underneath there, do you see how nice that is now to have that scalloped edge there? So let's just trim this down. We could rip it, but since it's already probably been ironed, I'm going to just leave it like that. And I will come back and trim that up a little bit better. But let's just first stitch that down. And I'm just going to use a plain kind of a, neutral color. And let's just do a couple of stitches to get this down. And then we can still see those roses in the background there. I hope everyone is doing well. The day this airs is the day I return from my Paris trip. So I'm hoping that I was able to find some fun things to add to my Etsy store that I will be able to bring back for you guys and share with you. The weather is going to be perfect there. I've been keeping an eye on it. It's going to be mid 60s to high 60s, which is like the absolute most perfect weather in my eye. I would rather have to have a tiny little sweater than be sweating. Okay, now that I've kind of stitched that down, I'm going to come in here in the back and trim that off just a little bit. Okay, now that looks a little bit better. Now, what else do I want to add? What other fabric? So I've got this other piece. These are all the Tim Holtz fabrics. I think let's slide this underneath there. And I will probably then need to stitch this down with the red. But then I also have this piece of fabric that is kind of like a script. And so let's just cut this here. And let's add a piece of it. And I like the way that looks like that. Just snip that there. Okay, and then what I will do is this will be the area that I will leave unstitched so that we can add whatever we want underneath there. Let me turn this. Like I said, you guys know I'm right-handed, and it's easier for me if I have this like this. And actually, since I cut this short here, I'm going to bring that over and cover that little flaw up. And I made a mistake. I went underneath when I shouldn't have, so let me rethread this needle. And I talked to the gal that I'm going to Paris with, and I also, you guys, okay, sister, finish your sentence. I talked to her, and we were also then deciding some other things that we wanted to do. We're not doing any of the touristy things. We've done them all, both of us. So we're not going to go to the Eiffel Tower. We're not going to go to the Louvre. We're not going to do any of that stuff. We're mainly going to eat. We do have a couple of appointments at hotels to tour the hotel. She is a travel agent, and she wants to check out hotels for, clients. And I said, yeah, I'll go along with that. One of them is giving us lunch, including in the tour. So that's kind of a little bonus. But what I was going to tell you guys is, and I will do a flip through of it, but I created a journal for her. I can't remember if I told you guys this, but when we were on our trip in Scotland, she had like a little notebook. It was just a composition notebook, that the kids would have. And she would journal all the time and sketch. And I thought, oh, she needs a custom journal from me. That's what she needs. Okay, so we've kind of tacked that down. You know what? I don't have any. I didn't come in here and tack a couple of places here, but so let me just do that. I don't want to have this thread over the red, so let's just do a couple of places where it's beige. So yeah, I'm excited to give her that journal, and it's all French digitals and French stamps that I've used. Everything in it, all French book pages. So yeah. Okay, so now we've laid down a little bit of red, but the other thing, I hiccuped. The other thing I thought we would do before we do our stitch is I have some Italian laundry labels that I pulled, and I thought one would be good up here to bring in the red over here. I may add something more there, but let's just pull in one of these labels. I like this one because it's so old looking. I think that is, what is that letter? The letters are different. They don't have, was it J's? They don't have the J's in the French laundry labels in Italy. So yeah, let's add that there, but I don't want it completely centered. So I'm going to bring it over to the right a little bit, and let's just stitch that down. So we have a little bit more red over here. That really adds some thickness there. I'm enjoying seeing everybody's post on our Facebook group, their progress. It's really fun. You know, that's the only thing about a YouTube channel. I love my YouTube channel, and I get to know quite a few people on my YouTube channel, but they're not able to post pictures on my channel so I can see what they've done. But with the Facebook group, they can. So I'm really enjoying that. So keep doing it, you guys. It's lots of fun, and it's never too late to join. You know, you can always catch up. Okay, I like having that there. Okay, let's just tie this off. And then we will start with our stitch. It's a really easy stitch. Oops, I didn't catch the loop. It's a very, very easy stitch. I think it's one of the first stitches I learned in embroiderying. Okay. And so the thread I'm going to use is a red thread. And you know what? As I'm looking at this, I'm wondering, do I want to bring it across here, or do I want to come this way? How do I want to do this? I was initially just going to go down. Let's start by just going down, and we'll see if that's good enough. So you're first going to just stitch a running stitch, which is basically in and out, in and out, in and out. And let me pull my book over to myself so that I can read to you guys what it says. It's also known as a cordonnet stitch. It's a whipped running stitch is worked in 2 stages and has a raised corded appearance. It is particularly effective when worked with 2 colors of thread. Let me set that there. Okay, so what you're going to do is just do some stitches down this row. And we're going to use red. And you want a little space in between each stitch. I'm quiet now because I'm concentrating. I don't know if I told you, my next trip is going to be, now see, that's too high up. I don't like that. I'm going to undo this and redo it. I want it to be more of a straight line. So my next trip is a trip within the United States. I think I told you guys this. My oldest sister, who's really never traveled very much at all, but it's her dream, it's been her dream to go to Maine. And so in April, I'm going to take her on a trip to Maine. And I'm sure we will probably, I don't know if we're going to fly into Boston or Portland, Maine. And then we'll rent a car and we'll drive around Maine to Camden. And you guys may not know this, but I was a travel nurse for probably about 5 years. And this was when traveling nurses first started back in, this would have been the late 1970s. And I went on a travel assignment to Fort Kent, Maine. I was there for 6 weeks. It's right on the Canadian and the United States border. As a matter of fact, my charge nurse lived in Canada, and so she drove over the border every day. That's how close it was. She drove over the border to work. And it was a small little town. It was, I think, a 4-bed intensive care unit. This was back when I was an intensive care unit nurse. And that was fun. Okay, let's just stop there. We'll see if we want to add more of this running stitch. And then now I'm going to show you what the whipped part means. So anyway, yeah, my sister and I, we're going to go to Maine, and I'll definitely want to go up to Fort Kent again. Look at, even that is just pretty, but I'm going to bring in a little bit of a gold color. And so what you're going to do is come up just above the red stitch. And I'm going to, again, turn this so I can do it easily because, again, I'm right-handed. And it's simple. It is actually just weaving this thread in and out between the red thread. Little bit tricky here with the lace because I don't want to catch that lace. And remember, whenever you're doing something like this, you always want to use the back of the needle to go underneath. It will help prevent from catching your fabric with the pointy end. In and out, in and out. Isn't that pretty? Oh, that's very rich looking. Come on. There we go. One more. And then what you're going to do is go down and anchor this off. So a running whip stitch and the color red are our prompts for this week. You know what we could do? Now this might be fun. Let's do some stitches in this and whip red. Shall we do that? Let's do that. And I'm wondering if I want to come over here. I think I'm going to go this way because I'll put something else here. In one of our other prompts coming up, I'm not sure what, but we will put something there. I'm not going to leave that empty. I've got this other thread. It's getting stuck over here. I need to get my pin cushion out of the way. So now we're going to, I was almost going to go back up this way. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull this out. The reason I'm taking that out is I'm thinking in advance. And do you see how that is a little bit, I trimmed it kind of wonky. So I'm going to want to add something there. And if I put the stitches, come on, if I put the stitches along here, then they're going to be covered up when I go to add something there. So I'm going to come up further here, and then I will be able to add something more down there. So let's just continue stitching here. So the way it is now, when you're a travel nurse, they give you an apartment, or you rent a room. If you decide not to take the housing from the travel nurse company, you get a stipend, salary, and you find your own housing. But back when they first started, you literally got a room in the hospital. And the hospital I worked at in Maine, it had at one time been run by nuns. And so they had one hallway down from where the intensive care unit was. And there were like dorm rooms. And so I was given one of those rooms with a twin bed. And I literally had to walk down the hallway to go to work. And then also one other time I did a travel nurse assignment in New Orleans. And it actually was in Algiers, which was across the river from New Orleans, across the Mississippi River. And in a not so safe area. It was so unsafe that, again, it was a Catholic hospital. And the priest, I didn't do that. The priest, anytime we went out, the priest would walk us to our cars. Because actually the name, what was the name? F. Edward Hebert was the name of the hospital, but there was I can't remember. There was a young nursing student that had been murdered there. And there was some reason, either they called one of the wings, named it after her or something like that. But yeah, the priest would walk us. But anyway, so my room when I was a travel nurse there was on the med-surg floor, the medical surgical floor, and it was in between two patient rooms, like real. So on one side of me, there were patients. On the other side of me, there were patients. And they put two of us nurses in one room. And here we're in the regular hospital beds. And we're using the buttons, bzz, 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 up and down. We weren't putting on the call bell to have people come give us stuff, but we were raising, lowering the beds to put the head of the bed up while we watched TV. That was so wild. I should have put a little bit more of a yellow stitch closer to there, but anyway. So yeah, that's how crazy it was. Now, just because you see this like this, let me tie this off and I'll explain to you guys. And you're probably catching on about snippet rolls already. One more. That seemed kind of loose there. Alrighty. Let me explain to you guys. We got some splaining to do. Remember Ricky and Lucy? Okay, so as I look at this, it's definitely not finished. Something needs to go here. Something needs to come up this way. But we've got time to think about what else we're going to add. But yeah, that's too plain over there. This I'm not so sure about right now, so that's why I need to bring in some more of this kind of a gold color with either buttons or fabric or beads. Maybe that needs to be the next week's prompt, is beads. We shall see. But anyway, that's it for today's video. Our color is red and our stitch is a running stitch, a whipped running stitch. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today at Juanette's Crafting Corner for my Slow Stitch Saturday. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Thanks and bye-bye.